I really think that planning touches kind of all the different ways in which a city functions. And so everything that you see when you're out in a community, whether it's like, the road system or other, infrastructure, your water services, your drinking water, where your water goes when you flush your toilet, all of those things are touched by long-range planning.
Yes.
And so the things we put in our plans today will end up showing in how the city functions 5 years from now, 10 years from now, decades from now.
What's up, College Station? I'm Grace Hollowell, and today I'm joined by Principal Planner Heather Wade. Hi, Heather. Welcome to the show.
Hi there.
I am grateful that you're here to talk about the Harvey Road District Plan. And I actually just went along Harvey Road for lunch today at Rudy's,
All right,
which
very
got
cool.
me thinking about what we're going to talk about today. But to kick things off, since this is your first episode on the show, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and kind of let's kick things off by explaining who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Heather Wade. I'm a principal planner in the Planning and Development Services Department. I'm specifically in the Long Range Planning Division, so everything that I do kind of centers around all of the long-range plans that help our city function. Most specifically, we're responsible for stewarding the comprehensive plan, which really is the guiding document for the city's overall vision of what will look like in the next couple of decades. And so I do everything from research and data analysis to community engagement, and yeah, that's what we do.
And what is the difference between long-range planning and short-term planning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, a lot of times when people go to school for planning, they assume they're going to be doing long-range planning, and then they end up doing kind of the day-to-day planning work. Mm-hmm. So the big difference is that those that do what we call current planning, they are reviewing development permits, they're reviewing zoning applications, they do that kind of day-to-day work. And then long range is where we really look at what do we want things to look like in 10 to 20 years. And that involves, looking at data and trying to figure out how things have changed over time to inform what the future might be.
Yeah, and that is something that is very important, especially for a city, to keep in mind and always be thinking about where we're going, where we're headed. And what is one thing that you wish more people knew about your department or specialization?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. I guess one thing that always comes to mind for me is that planning is more than just zoning.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when people think of planning, they think of zoning and development permits, and it is more than that. And I think that, too, I would say, really, I think sometimes people don't realize how involved planning really is behind everything
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to how a city functions. And so that's probably the big one.
Yes, a lot of what you do is done behind the scenes.
Yes.
And what is your favorite thing about your job?
Oh, so definitely the community engagement aspect. We work with people through the planning process and get input. Everything about what we do is really based off of what the community values and what they want to see in the future. And so to me, that's the most rewarding part, is getting to work with people to figure out what they want out of the community and then try to help implement that after it gets adopted.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you always lived in College Station? Did you go to school here?
I went to school here. I've lived here off and on a few different times in my life, but yes, I am an Aggie. I went to school here, met my husband as a student at A&M, and then left for a little while and came back.
And that community engagement, I'm sure, kind of goes hand in hand with meeting your husband here and going to school here, you have a lot of
Yes.
care for the community.
Absolutely.
And your job obviously is for the residents, and we say all the time we are public servants. We're here to serve our College Station residents, and the planning department really does that as well. So going off of that, how does what you do biggest impact the residents here in College Station?
Okay, yeah, I kind of alluded to this in one of my other responses to you, but I really think that planning touches kind of all the different ways in which a city functions. And so everything that you see when you're out in a community, whether it's like, the road system or other, infrastructure, your water services, your drinking water, where your water goes when you flush your toilet, all of those things are touched by long-range planning.
Yes.
And so the things we put in our plans today will end up showing in how the city functions 5 years from now, 10 years from now, decades from now.
Yes, absolutely. So discussing the Harvey District Plan, what is this plan?
So this is a small area planning effort that was really, really spurred from the comprehensive plan. It was identified as an area for redevelopment in the comprehensive plan. The area generally is bounded by the Highway 6 frontage road to Texas Avenue, and then Holloman to Dominic, to give people an idea. And basically the area is getting older. It's a major commercial corridor and gateway into the community, and because of its aging infrastructure, aging buildings, both commercial buildings and apartment complexes, it was identified probably back in the early 2000s as an area of opportunity for reinvestment. And so now we are at the place where we really are trying to look at what does it look like to plan for this area, what could this area look like in 10 or 20 years, and how do we improve it?
What makes this corridor especially important to College Station's future growth and development?
That's a great question. So there are several different kind of commercial hubs in this area that are actually really important to the city. The Post Oak area, and then also the area along Texas Avenue, and they bring in a lot of business to the city. But because of some of the aging, it's something we want to address. But it turns out that even people from outside of College Station come to these areas. And so it's not just for locals, but we see a regional draw to the area for what is there. And so that's one. And then, of course, the connection to Texas A&M, it is a primary gateway into the city, and it also is kind of a connector between like campus and, say, Wolf Pen Creek Park.
Yes.
So a really key area for our city.
Yes, and that's something that I didn't necessarily think of. You mentioned that people outside of College Station are still coming and visiting and going to the businesses in this area. We had our parks team on a few episodes ago talking about the 7-on-7 tournament. We have Games of Texas coming up, which is located not far from that area at Veterans Park. But we just had the I Heart America celebration at Wolf Pen Creek. So a lot of people who don't necessarily live here are visiting and going to those businesses and traveling on that road. And definitely this is an area of priority for sure. So how does this redevelopment plan connect to the comprehensive plan and long-term vision for the city?
Yeah, so it is identified in the comprehensive plan as a planning area. So we were specifically directed by the plan and council to do a small area plan for this area. A portion of the planning area is considered a redevelopment area, which basically just means it's identified as an opportunity for reinvestment. A lot of times people think that when we say redevelopment, we really mean like taking a bulldozer and wiping everything clean, and that's really not what we mean. It's really looking at where are those areas that could be revitalized and how we may reinvest in those areas. And that was really the focus of the area in the comprehensive plan. And then now this specific effort is our way of taking that idea in the comprehensive plan and really, zoning in, really focusing in on the area to figure out how to implement the comprehensive plan's vision.
Yes, absolutely. And what are the biggest challenges currently facing the Harvey Road corridor?
So I mentioned, the aging infrastructure. We have aging buildings. We have apartment complexes and commercial buildings that are, they've been around since the 70s, the 80s. And so that's one challenge. We also have, some disconnected pedestrian and bicycle areas that could probably use some better connectivity. We also have turnover, so there are certain sections along Harvey Road, people might, notice that we've had some empty restaurants.
Yes.
And so things like that, are definitely challenging, but part of the point of the planning process is really to try and identify those issues and then develop a plan on how to fix them.
And how has the corridor changed over the years? I know I helped work on our College Station, and they called it College Station History Book, and seeing some of the old pictures from Harvey Road back in the day, it looks very different now.
Yeah, and it is kind of cool if you go back in time, you can look at aerial photographs of, when it first started developing, and, you can see the progression from fields of open space to development.
Yeah.
But you are correct. It is mostly developed. There's a large presence of multifamily, very large presence of commercial, and for the most part, pretty built out. And I would say that, it is known for being an area where students live because it is affordable, but it is also an area where a lot of families live, and I don't think a lot of people know that.
Right. And what kind of feedback have you received from residents and business owners about the area so far?
Yeah, so we launched, I think it was about a month ago, maybe a little more than a month ago, the official planning process. So we have had an opportunity to start hearing from people, and I would say that we've gotten a lot of great input. Some of it has been centered around connectivity. Some of it has been, more about, what they hope to see out of some of our commercial areas. And then the really great thing that I've heard repeatedly is just how excited people are. I think there's a lot of love for this area from a lot of people, whether they live there or not.
Right.
And so people are just excited to see that, we're saying, hey, we care about the area. Let's talk about its future.
Yes, absolutely. And traffic and mobility are common concerns in the area as well. How is the plan addressing those issues?
Yeah, so transportation and mobility are going to be major considerations for the plan. There will definitely be some kind of transportation and mobility component. Our transportation team is actually working on a mobility study where they're going to be, I think, really looking at that piece in very close detail. But there's, definitely room for improvement. The Harvey Road area is kind of an auto-centric area. It's, very car
heavy.
And it was developed kind of around the car. And there have been improvements over time to make it more pedestrian friendly. And they're, really great examples of that around Oaks Park and the Wolf Pen Creek Trail. But to, I think, really make improvements, we'll want to make sure that everything is really connected.
And what opportunities do planners see in the corridor that may not be obvious to average residents?
Well, I guess kind of going back to that point of, there's a lot of love for this area. I was pleasantly surprised with how even people that just, I shop in this area, reaching out and saying, I'm so glad you're doing this. I, for one, actually, when I was in college, lived on Harvey Road.
Okay.
And so I think, sometimes people, have a connection from, maybe a decade or two ago. And so that's been, I think, really cool. But overall, I would just say, there's a lot of opportunity for, putting something together that helps business owners make improvements to their buildings. I think there's an opportunity to, just improve quality of life for people who live there or visit. And that's probably, I think, the big one.
Yeah. I know when my husband and I first moved here, we had never been to College Station before. And one of the first places we went was Sweet Eugene's for coffee.
Yeah. You got to get a Snickers latte.
Okay, I think I got an almond joy latte, so similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the morning after we got in. I looked up where the spot for coffee was, and it took me to Sweet Eugene's, and I'm a fan ever since.
Yep.
So the plan mentions creating a vibrant mixed-use destination. What does that mean?
So when we talk about mixed use, usually what we're really referring to is the type of development where you can live, work, and play.
Yes.
A lot of times people think of mixed use as strictly vertical. So when you say that, they think of the tall building where you have some kind of commercial type environment on the bottom floor and then residential above. And that is an example of mixed use, what we call vertical mixed use. But then we have examples of horizontal mixed use where you might have several buildings on a parcel, but they are each different. One might be residential, one might be commercial, but they all, kind of connect to each other and influence each other. And so that's, really what we are talking about when we talk about like a vibrant, thriving, mixed-use area. We're talking about a place where you can live, work, and play.
Yes, a little something for everyone.
Yeah.
So how do you balance redevelopment and modernization while still supporting existing businesses and preserving community character?
Oh, so that is a challenge
I'm
for
sure.
I would say that, again, when we talk about redevelopment, we're not talking about bulldozing a bunch of existing things. We're really talking about what does it look like to reinvest in an area that needs to be revitalized. And so that's kind of the first thing I think that, we take into account. Ultimately, if someone redevelops, it's going to be their decision. Private property, we're in a heavy private property state, so ultimately redevelopment is going to be at the choice of the property owner. But where we can come in is to help identify what that could potentially look like, and maybe even like the incentives for not just somebody who wants to redevelop, but maybe somebody who wants to improve the facade of their building.
Yeah.
So for business owners, I think that there's an opportunity to participate in this process to say, well, these are the needs that our businesses that already exist have. How does that fit in? And that's, that can result in programs or policies that benefit what's already there.
Yes, absolutely. And how does the plan benefit economic growth?
Oh, well, because this area is a major commercial corridor, any improvements to the area will ultimately have economic development benefits, whether it's, helping existing business owners or helping to develop plans for, say, the Post Oak Mall and how that transitions into the future. But ultimately, any revitalization to the area is going to see some kind of economic benefit because we're improving aesthetics, we're improving quality of life, and there's only going up from there.
Yes, absolutely. So how can residents and business owners get involved in this planning process?
Yeah, so there's still a lot of opportunities to participate, which is really exciting. I will say to go to our website. We have a website online. It's www.cstx.gov/Harvey Road. And through there, you can learn about the different ways to get involved. But some examples include we have an online map. It's an interactive map where you can drop pins and tell us things you don't like, things you do like. If you have an amazing idea for an area, you can give us an idea. For example, my daughter really wants me to put a pin on the map for a roller rink, which I can't do because, I'm a project manager for the planning process. But that's just an example of, a fun idea that someone might have, and you can put that in there. And that's really cool. We're going to have a community survey go out in August, several workshops that people can attend to give us their ideas that way. And we're going to be popping up around the area. So we're going to be going to Oaks Park, the mall. We're going to go to all the different shopping centers, and we'll have tables set up to get feedback from people where they are. And that, I think, is maybe the thing I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the people and try and get some input that way. But those are just some examples. We also have a listserv. You can sign up to get email updates. And then, if you follow along as events do get planned, they'll go onto the website, and we'll put out blasts to our email list and keep people updated.
Yes, lots of ways to get involved.
Yes.
And why is public input such an important part of this plan?
So people that live in the area, people that work in the area, they are the ones that know the area best.
Right.
So, we might have ideas of, what best practices are for reinvestment strategies or revitalization strategies, but ultimately the people who actually experience the area are the ones that are going to enable us to create something that truly makes a difference and matters. And so without hearing from people, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So the plan to me truly is, it's a bottom-up initiative, and it can't be successful if we don't get input from the people who use the area every day.
Yes, absolutely. And has there been any surprising or particularly valuable comments from the public so far?
Well, I kind of already touched on some of it. I think that I was just really excited about how happy people were that we were doing this. Sometimes planning efforts can result in a little bit of, contentious conversation. And so, I was excited that we received such positive response that this was happening. And then, I think a lot of people recognize opportunity and want to get involved. And that, to me, was really exciting.
Yeah. So once the plan is finalized, how does the city move on from ideas on paper to actual projects?
Oh, gosh, the big implementation question. Yeah, that is a really good question. And so plans get implemented in all different ways.
Yeah.
Primarily, usually by the time we have an adopted plan, we at least have some kind of idea of the programs or policies that might be needed to implement the plan. So sometimes our plans are implemented through programs that maybe we partner with economic development or parks and recreation to create programs. And then sometimes it truly is policy changes, and they get implemented by, having changes to our regulations. And then the big one is, through capital projects and capital programming. And so, everything that we do in a plan ultimately is going to cost some amount of money, and a lot of times we have to work through how that gets incorporated into capital projects. And so those are some ways. And these are long-term plans, so 20-year time span. So there is time to implement, but usually we try to identify what can be done in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term, and then break them out evenly as possible. But yeah, I would say those are the primary ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the next steps in the planning process as of right now?
So as of right now, we are finishing up our existing conditions report, which is where we basically collect as much data as we can on the planning area and synthesize that data to really understand what the issues are, what the needs are. We're finishing that up right now. And once that is done, that'll go out. We also are going to be doing a market analysis to inform the economic development strategies that will be identified for the plan. From there, we're working with a consultant to do some on the technical side, do some modeling work to develop different scenarios of what things could look like in the future. And that is going to be exciting because once those scenarios are developed, we're going to be able to bring them out into the community to get more input on those. And people can weigh in and say, yes, that's my Harvey Road, or no, that's really not quite what I would envision for this area, and then get feedback that way. And then from that, ultimately, we will be able to start drafting a plan, drafting policies that go into that plan, and ultimately, actions that would implement the vision for the Harvey Road area.
Yeah. And what should residents watch for over the next few years as the corridor evolves?
Yeah, so I guess I would say improvement.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, right? So once the plan gets through the process, gets adopted, then we go into implementation and start figuring out, okay, how do we implement this vision? And so that's what you look out for is, the small improvements. And, of course, nothing happens overnight.
Right.
These are 20-year plans. And so while you won't see things overnight, you might see things happening here and there, and then eventually, it'll still be your Harvey Road area. It'll just be a little better.
Yeah. And before we go, one more time, where can people find out more information? How can they get involved?
Yeah, they can go to cstx.gov/Harvey Road.
Awesome. And before we wrap up, we have a fun little lightning round of questions.
Okay,
Are
cool.
you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. If you had to describe the Harvey District Plan as a movie genre, what would it be?
Let's see. I would say it's an adventure, maybe combined with like a makeover montage.
Okay. Awesome. So like a destination HGTV show. I get it. Yeah.
With a little bit of adventure in there.
Yeah. If Harvey Road had a personality, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as maybe like a longtime local resident with deep roots in the community, but passion for making great places.
Awesome. Okay. And if you weren't a planner, what career would you have pursued?
Well, I probably would have pursued something along the lines of teaching.
Okay.
Maybe like being a professor.
Yeah.
I really like teaching. I like research. I like helping people understand how cities work the way they do. So maybe professors is my
Yeah.
alternate universe career.
What is your favorite local spot to grab lunch during a busy workday?
Oh, I love this question. So my latest one, because it kind of changes.
yeah.
But I would say lately my go-to has been Tacos La Perlita.
Okay.
Which is actually in the planning area.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah, I've heard a lot about them. I have not yet
Yeah.
tried them, but
Yeah,
I know
really
you're
good.
Yeah, you're like the second or third person that has
Yes,
mentioned them to
I
me.
love it. I love it. My husband and I, sometimes we'll meet there during lunch, so it's a good little spot.
Yeah. And finally, what is one word you would use to describe the future of Harvey Road?
Opportunity.
Opportunity. That's a good one. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
And that's what's up.